the one spiritual healing principle that shocks every new student. We are not gathered this day to learn something new. No, we are not here to acquire, to accumulate, to be taught in the sense the world understands teaching. Rather, we are here to remember, to awaken. And in order to awaken, we must begin not with words, but with silence. For in silence is the presence of the Word, not the word spoken with lips, but the Word that was in the beginning with God and was God. John 1:1. Let us pause, not merely in quiet, but in inner stillness, that we may catch the whisper which does not come with sound. For the Spirit uttereth not in thunder, nor in earthquake, nor in the voice of many waters, but in the still small voice. 1 Kings 19:12. Until that voice speaks, we have heard nothing, though the air be full of voices. Until that presence is felt, we have seen nothing, though we read every sacred book on earth. And so before we begin, we set aside ambition, even the ambition to be spiritual. We set aside the longing to be healed, the desire to be safe, the craving for peace, yes, even the longing for God. These are but distractions if they be grasped as needs. For God is not found by seeking, God is revealed in stillness. Now, let us gently lift our consciousness inward. Let the body rest. Let the mind loosen. Let all memory and desire fall away. Be still and know that I am God. Psalm 46:10. This is not a command from a distant deity, but the very voice within you saying, cease your activity, cease your struggle, for the fullness of God is already present here, now, as you. It is necessary at the beginning of every spiritual work to make this inner acknowledgement, not that we may invoke God, for God needs no invitation, not to attract some divine power, for no power is absent, but rather to recognize the always already nature of spirit. Lo, I am with you always, even unto the end of the world. Matthew 28:20. I, not your thought of me, not your belief about me, but the living I am. Why, then, do we not experience it? Not because God is absent, but because we are noisy. Our minds are filled with affirmations, techniques, declarations, each one a veil over the truth. And so today, I am not here to give you another veil. I am here to gently lead you into the recognition of what is eternally true. Now, you may feel in this moment a sacred discomfort, for we are not beginning with an outline, nor an objective, nor a how-to. We are not setting goals. We are not promising outcomes. In the world, you are taught to plan, to aim, to achieve. But in spirit, you are asked to surrender. And this surrender is the shock of the soul. You are not being called to become something greater. You are being called to lay aside everything that you are not. For what you are, you already are. Before Abraham was, I am. John 8:58. That is the nature of your being. And so we prepare not to reach God, but to recognize that we have never been separate. All healing begins here. Not with a treatment, not with a formula, not with prayer as request, but with the still awareness that I and the Father are one. John 10:30. This is the beginning and the end of all spiritual demonstration. And it is not said to impress, nor to assure. It is said because it is the truth. Let us now let that truth rest in our heart. Not analyze it, not repeat it, not affirm it. Let us be still and behold As it is written, stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. Exodus 14:13. See not with outer eyes, but with that inner vision that knows no separation. The one principle we shall explore in this hour requires no effort to believe, no strength to hold, no practice to perfect. It only asks that you set down what is not so and let the light shine. The light shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. John 1-5. But you are not darkness. You are the child of light. You are not ignorance. You are the awareness of truth. So now we are ready not to hear something new, but to be shown what always was. We are not here to improve our lives, but to witness the truth that life is not personal. It is God appearing as your individual being. I am come that they might have life, and that they might have it more abundantly. John 10:10. Not your life, but my life as you. In that spirit, we begin. It is not surprising that many who come sincerely into this work experience a deep inner shock, not an emotional upset, not the kind of shaking one feels from loss or failure, but the soul's jolt when it begins to perceive the falsity of everything it has ever trusted. And this moment is not a tragedy. It is the beginning of freedom. All your life you have believed, with the best of intentions, in a world of opposites, good and evil, health and sickness, lack and abundance, peace and conflict. You have learned to pray against evil, to work toward good, to protect yourself from danger, to attract safety, to hope for the better while avoiding the worse. And yet now, in this work, you are being told not only that these efforts are unnecessary, but that they were never valid. You are being told, gently but firmly, that there are not two powers in this world, that there never have been. This is the great offense of truth, that what we have called evil has no power, that what we have feared has no law, that what we have run from has no presence. And so the student asks, must I stop praying for protection? Must I give up my affirmations of abundance? Must I let go of even my declarations of divine power overcoming error? And the answer, quietly, is yes. For each one of those contains the seed of two powers. The very moment you ask God to overcome something, you have placed yourself outside the truth. You have unknowingly declared that there is something for God to overcome. And in doing so, you have denied the allness of God. Thou shalt have no other gods before me, Exodus 20-3, is not merely a religious commandment. It is the foundation of spiritual reality. It is the eternal law of being. The moment you admit another power, whether sickness, error, sin, or lack, you have broken that law in consciousness. And what follows is not punishment, but the consequence of unreality being entertained as real. Now, I am not condemning your past, nor am I asking you to erase everything you have done to survive, to seek help, to grow spiritually. All of it served its purpose to bring you here. But now we begin to see that all those steps were steps within the dream. And if you are willing to awaken, you must be willing to see through the illusion, not adjust it. Jesus never healed by fighting evil. Never once did he acknowledge the power of sin, of disease, of death. His words were, "Get thee hence, Satan, for it is written, Thou shalt worship the Lord thy God, and him only shalt thou serve." Matthew 4:10. The adversary was not a being, but a temptation to believe in a power other than God. He did not treat leprosy. He ignored it. He did not enter into struggle with demons. He saw no man possessed. He did not cast out devils by resistance. He simply recognized the allness of God in every moment, and the illusion faded before his light. The prince of this world cometh, and hath nothing in me, John 14:30. That is the consciousness of healing, not victory over something, but the awareness that there is nothing there to be victorious over. Now you see why it is shocking. You have prayed to a God of might, a God of intervention, a God of blessing and protection. And you are told now that this God does not fight for you, not because he will not, but because he does not need to. You are told now that healing does not come by applying truth to error, but by withdrawing belief in error altogether. That is why the world cannot understand this message, and that is why the ego resists it. It is easier for the ego to be religious than to be still. It would rather be devout in affirmations than silent in realization. It would rather serve God with fervor than die to the belief in self-power. But hear this. No matter how many times you say God is all, if you still fear sickness, lack, or death, then in your heart you believe there is another power. It is this, the hidden belief in a second power, that we are called to see and to surrender. This is not accomplished in a day. This is not done by declaration. It is a daily undoing, a dissolving of illusion through quiet, continual beholding. As Jesus said, judge not according to the appearance, but judge righteous judgment, John 7:24. Righteous judgment sees no opposing power, only God. This is the beginning of true healing. Not when the body improves, not when the condition changes, but when your inner eye opens and you see that there is nothing present but God. When you look upon pain or need or conflict and say, thou couldst have no power at all against me except it were given thee from above, John 19:11, and then realize nothing has been given from above but the allness of God. In that moment, fear dissolves. And when fear dissolves, the body follows. The world follows. Life follows. So now, you are no longer seeking to overcome. You are no longer striving to get results. You are no longer calling on God to fix, repair, or rescue. You are entering into the sacred space where healing is not something done, but something seen, not with outer eyes, but with inner realization. That is why Jesus said, if therefore thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. Matthew 6:22, not healed, full of light. This is what shocks the student, that there is no work to be done but awareness, that there is no fight to win, no enemy to cast out, no devil to rebuke. There is only God and nothing else. This truth, once realized, not memorized, not affirmed, not believed, but realized, is the one principle of all healing. Let us now not think upon this. Let us rest in it. Now we come to the point at which words must be used, not because truth requires them, but because the human sense still listens through language. And yet, even here, let us remember that words do not contain truth. They only point. The truth itself is caught, not taught. Still, there is one statement that must be made, and must be made without compromise, without qualification, and without apology. There is only one power, one presence, one cause, one law, one life. Not two, not many, not one good power and another that appears evil, not God and something else, God alone. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. Deuteronomy 6-4. This is not theology. It is not doctrine. It is not belief. It is the fact of being. Every spiritual teaching that has endured, every true revelation rests upon this single foundation. Moses glimpsed it, Isaiah proclaimed it, Jesus lived it, Paul realized it, and every mystic who has broken through the veil of sense has testified to it in one form or another. God is all. Beside him, there is no power. Now notice this carefully. We are not saying that God is the strongest power or the highest power or the ultimate power. Those are still comparisons, and comparisons require opposites. We are saying that God is the only power, and therefore what the world calls power is not power at all. It is belief. It is appearance. It is illusion. This is where the mind rebels. For the mind has been trained to measure, to evaluate, to weigh causes and effects. It sees sickness and calls it cause. It sees poverty and calls it condition. It sees sin and calls it law. But the spiritual eye sees differently. It sees that what appears as cause is only effect, and what appears as effect has no cause at all. The things which are seen are temporal, but the things which are not seen are eternal. 2 Corinthians 4:18. This one principle does not operate. It does not act. It does not move into a situation. It does not intervene. It simply is, and because it is, nothing else can be. When this is understood, healing ceases to be mysterious. It becomes inevitable. Light does not overcome darkness. Darkness disappears when light is present. So it is with God and every appearance of discord. Jesus did not say, I use the power of God. He said, I can of mine own self do nothing. John 5:30. He did not place himself as an agent wielding divine force. He removed himself entirely. He lived in the awareness that God alone is, and because of this, what the world called sickness, lack, and death had no place to stand in his consciousness. Now, let us be very clear. This principle cannot be used. The moment you attempt to use it, you have turned it into a power over something. And in that very moment, you have reintroduced duality. You have set God on one side and a problem on the other. That is not spiritual healing. That is metaphysics at best, and it will always produce limited results. Spiritual healing begins only when the desire to change conditions has yielded to the recognition that conditions are not causes, they are shadows on the wall of thought. And when thought yields to truth, the shadow disappears not because it is attacked, but because it was never substance. Thou art of purer eyes than to behold evil. Habakkuk 1:13. Do you see what that means? It does not say that God looks upon evil and tolerates it, or looks upon evil and overcomes it. It says God cannot behold it. And since God is the only presence, then evil has no observer, no witness, no law, no life. It exists only so long as the human mind bears false witness. This is why Jesus gave the commandment, judge not, Matthew 7:1. Not because judgment is unkind, but because judgment creates. To judge something as real is to give it place in consciousness. And whatever is given place in consciousness must appear in experience. That is law, not divine law, but the law of belief. The one principle demands that we withdraw judgment from appearances, not selectively, but entirely. Not only from what we call evil, but from what we call good. For as long as we live in the realm of opposites, we have not yet entered the kingdom. The kingdom of God cometh not with observation, for behold, the kingdom of God is within you. Luke 17:20, 21. Now, you may ask, how then do we heal? And the answer is we do not. Healing is not our function. Our function is realization. The moment consciousness yields to the truth that God alone is, the body, the mind, and the circumstances align without effort, not because they are fixed, but because they are no longer misinterpreted. This one principle does not require faith in the human sense. It requires only surrender of false belief. Faith does not make it true. It recognizes what already is. And when recognition takes place, something within you rests. The strain leaves. The fear loosens. The urgency fades. And in that resting, the Christ is revealed. In him we live and move and have our being. Acts 17:28. Not occasionally, not in moments of prayer, but always. This is not a future state. It is not a reward. It is the present fact of existence. And the moment this becomes real to you, not intellectually, but inwardly, you will discover that healing was never the goal. Peace was never the goal. Even harmony was never the goal. God realization was the goal, and everything else follows as its shadow. Let us sit with this, not to think about it, but to allow it to reveal itself. For this one principle does not enter consciousness by effort. It dawns, and when it dawns, the night is gone. Now we come to a point where many earnest students falter, not because they lack sincerity, but because they still hold very subtly to a personal sense of life. And as long as life is viewed personally, healing must appear personal as well. This is the last stronghold of illusion, and it yields only to understanding. From the very beginning of our spiritual seeking, we have been taught to think in terms of someone being sick and someone else being healed. We speak of a patient and a practitioner, of one who gives help and one who receives it. But I tell you plainly, this picture has never been true. It is a picture formed by the human mind, and it must dissolve before spiritual healing can take place. Healing has never been about a person. It has never been about your body, your condition, your history, or your future. Nor has it ever been about my understanding, my prayers, or my capacity to help. All of this belongs to the realm of appearances, and appearances, no matter how convincing, are not reality. Jesus did not see persons, he saw being. He did not encounter sick men and women. He encountered God, appearing as individual expression. And because of this, he could say, "Call no man your father upon the earth, for one is your Father which is in heaven." Matthew 23:9. This was not a social instruction. It was a metaphysical declaration. He was stripping away the personal sense of identity, which is the root of all discord. Now observe this carefully. The moment you see yourself as a person needing healing, you have already accepted the belief that life is in form. And the moment you see another as a person needing help, you have already accepted separation. Both positions deny the truth that God alone is life and that life is indivisible. Spiritual healing begins when this personal sense is gently, quietly dissolved, not resisted, not condemned, not argued with, simply seen through. As Paul wrote, henceforth know we no man after the flesh. 2 Corinthians 5:16. That is not poetry, that is instruction. To know man after the flesh is to misknow him. To know man spiritually is to behold the Christ. This is why personal concern, no matter how compassionate it appears, often delays healing. Concern assumes danger. Anxiety assumes power in appearances. Sympathy assumes reality in suffering. But spiritual love assumes only God, and love that sees only God is the greatest healing force, not because it acts, but because it reveals. You will notice that in the Master's healings, there is no personal struggle, no emotional involvement, no sense of urgency. He does not rush. He does not strain. He does not plead. He simply knows. And what does he know? I am in the Father, and the Father in me. John 14-11. That knowing leaves no room for a second presence. Now, this does not mean indifference. It does not mean coldness. It does not mean withdrawal from human relationships. It means that love is lifted out of the personal sense and restored to its divine source. It means that instead of loving a sick person, you behold God where a sick person seems to be. And in that beholding, the illusion loses its foundation. The practitioner then has no patient, and the patient, if he would be healed, must come to see that he is not a patient. This does not happen by telling him so. It happens through the silent radiation of a consciousness that has already relinquished personal sense. Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus. Philippians 2-5. That mind does not identify itself with form, condition, or history. When healing is understood impersonally, something extraordinary occurs. Responsibility disappears, not because care is lost, but because God takes over. There is no longer the burden of trying to make something happen. There is no fear of failure. There is no pride in success. There is only the quiet assurance that the Father that dwelleth in me, he doeth the works. John 14:10. This is why I say that healing was never personal and never could be. God does not heal you. God reveals itself. And in that revelation, what never belonged to God cannot remain. Disease, sin, lack, these are not personal problems. They are false beliefs of separation. And when separation is surrendered, they fade as naturally as mist before the sun. So we do not work on persons. We do not work on bodies. We do not work on conditions. We abide. We behold. We bear witness. And in that witnessing, truth stands revealed. And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. John 8:32. Not your effort, not your struggle, not your understanding, the truth itself. Let us rest here for a moment, not to think about this, but to allow the personal sense to loosen its grip. For when the personal sense yields, the Christ appears. And where the Christ appears, healing is inevitable. Now, we must face a question that arises in every sincere heart. If there is only one power, if healing is not personal, if God alone is, why then do appearances seem so real? Why does pain feel real to the body? Why does lack appear convincing to the mind? Why does fear grip the heart as though it had substance and authority? The answer is simple, though not easy to accept at first. Appearances are convincing only because they are believed. They do not deceive by power, they persuade by familiarity. They have been accepted generation after generation as facts of life, and what is universally believed takes on the weight of law, yet it has no divine sanction. Scripture calls this the carnal mind, and it is written that the carnal mind is enmity against God, for it is not subject to the law of God, neither indeed can be. Romans 8-7. This mind is not evil. It is simply ignorant of truth. It interprets what it sees through the senses and then declares, this is real. But the senses were never created to discern reality. They were created to report appearance. Jesus never trusted appearances. Not once did he ask, how long has this man been sick? Not once did he inquire into causes, heredity, or prognosis. When told that Lazarus was dead, he did not rush to overcome death. He calmly said, our friend Lazarus sleepeth, John 11:11. To human sense, this was denial. To spiritual consciousness, it was accuracy. Appearances seem real because the human mind has learned to react to them. Reaction is the breath that keeps illusion alive. Fear reacts. Concern reacts. Sympathy reacts. Resistance reacts. And every reaction says, this has power over me. Yet the Master said plainly, why take ye thought for your life? Matthew 6:25. Not because thought is immoral, but because thought that reacts has already accepted a false premise. You see, appearances have no power to sustain themselves. They require consent, they require belief, they require reaction. And when reaction is withdrawn, not suppressed, not denied, but gently relinquished, appearances lose their momentum. They have nothing to feed upon. Resist not evil, Matthew 5:39, does not mean submit to suffering. It means do not grant evil the dignity of resistance. Now, let us understand something clearly. To see appearances as unreal does not mean pretending they are not present to the senses. It means recognizing that what is present to the senses is not present to God. And since God is the only presence, what God does not know has no law to support it. The world was made by him, and the world knew him not. John 1:10. This world of appearances, of sickness, sin, lack, fear, does not know God, because it is not born of God. It is born of belief. It is sustained by acceptance, and it disappears when belief yields to truth. This is why spiritual healing does not come by changing appearances. Any attempt to change appearances keeps them in focus and grants them importance. Healing comes when appearances are understood, not fought, when they are recognized as shadows cast by belief, not conditions imposed by God. A shadow has no substance. It has no law. It has no resistance. And yet, if you try to fight a shadow, you will struggle endlessly. But if you turn toward the light, the shadow disappears without effort. So it is with every appearance that the world calls discord. Now here is the subtle point. Appearances do not disappear because you declare them unreal. They disappear when you no longer need them to define reality. When consciousness rests in God, appearances are seen for what they are: temporary beliefs, passing forms, false interpretations. And when they are seen as such, they are already fading. This is why the Master said, take no thought, saying, what shall we eat? Or what shall we drink? Or wherewithal shall we be clothed? Matthew 6:31. He was not careless of human needs. He was revealing that concern itself is the veil. The kingdom appears when concern is gone, not because needs are ignored, but because they are understood as already met in God. So do not be troubled if appearances shout. They have always shouted. They have never whispered. Truth whispers. Truth does not argue. Truth does not compete. Truth waits. And when the heart is quiet enough, truth is heard. Let us then cease reacting, not by discipline, but by understanding, not by effort, but by recognition. Let us behold appearances without fear, without judgment, without condemnation. And as we do, we shall find that what once seemed solid is now transparent. What once seemed powerful is now empty. What once demanded attention now fades into nothingness. Judge nothing before the time until the Lord come, who both will bring to light the hidden things of darkness. 1 Corinthians 4-5. That light is already here. And in that light, appearances have no place to stand. Let us rest here in that awareness. Now we come to a point that must be approached with great care, for here the human mind most readily intrudes with imagination, expectation, and desire. When we speak of healing, the mind immediately begins to look for an event, a sensation, a moment in time when something changes. But spiritual healing does not take place in time, nor does it take place in matter. It takes place in consciousness, and often so quietly that the human mind is scarcely aware of it. Nothing dramatic happens in healing. There is no flash of power, no force released, no battle won. What happens is far simpler and far more radical. A false belief is dropped. That is all. And yet, when a false belief is dropped, an entire structure built upon it collapses. Healing occurs when consciousness yields not to sickness or fear, but to truth. It is the moment when the mind stops asserting, stops denying, stops treating, stops directing, and becomes still enough for reality to be recognized. In quietness and in confidence shall be your strength, Isaiah 30-15. Not in effort, not in intensity, not in spiritual ambition. Very often, the student expects healing to feel like something happening, but healing feels more like something ceasing. The pressure is gone, the strain lifts, the sense of responsibility dissolves. The need to make something happen disappears. And in that very release, harmony is already present. The Master never said, I heal you. He said, thy faith hath made thee whole. Mark 5:34. Not faith in healing, not faith in power, not faith in a person, but faith as recognition. Faith that sees what is already true. Faith that rests in God and does not look to appearances for confirmation. Now, let us understand this clearly. Healing is not the result of correct thinking. It is not produced by replacing negative thoughts with positive ones. That is mental work. And mental work always deals with opposites. Spiritual healing begins when thinking itself subsides and awareness takes its place. Be still and know, Psalm 46:10. Knowing is not thinking. In that stillness, something within you recognizes something eternal, not with excitement, not with emotion, with a quiet certainty that cannot be explained. It is the inner acknowledgement God is here. And when God is here, nothing else can be here. This is not spoken aloud. It is felt. It is known. This is why some healings appear instantaneous and others unfold gradually. The principle is always instantaneous. Truth does not unfold. It is. But the yielding of belief may take time. The habit of reacting may still be present. The tendency to consult appearances may still linger. And yet, even then, the healing has already taken place in consciousness. What follows is simply the adjustment of appearance. According to your faith be it unto you, Matthew 9:29. Faith here is not hope, it is not belief, it is receptivity, it is the openness that allows truth to register. And when truth registers, there is nothing left to be healed. You must understand this. No condition is healed. No disease is corrected. No lack is supplied. These are all appearances, and appearances are not subjects of spiritual work. What is revealed is the presence of God, and what is not of God cannot remain in that presence. It dissolves not because it is attacked, but because it was never real. This is why the Master said, "Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you." Matthew 6:33. Not because God rewards seeking, but because when the kingdom is recognized, the things that seemed missing are found to have been present all along. Healing, then, is not an achievement. It is not a success. It is not something you can take credit for or fear losing. It is simply the natural state of being revealed when false belief is absent. Just as darkness does not return when light is present, so discord does not return when truth is realized, unless belief is reintroduced. And this is why vigilance is required, not vigilance against disease or lack, but vigilance against the belief in separation. The only enemy is the belief that God is not here. And that belief dissolves the moment you recognize, quietly and without strain, God is. There is no formula for this, no technique, no guarantee of time, but there is certainty. For my word shall not return unto me void, but it shall accomplish that which I please. Isaiah 55:11. Truth never fails. It is only belief that wavers. Let us rest now in this understanding, not to hold it, not to remember it, not to use it, but to let it be. Healing is not something you do after this moment. It is what naturally follows when this moment is seen for what it is. Now we come to a point that touches very deeply the habits of almost every sincere seeker. For most of us have been trained religiously, morally, spiritually, to believe that effort is virtue. We are taught to strive, to work, to apply ourselves diligently to every worthy end. And so when we come into spiritual living, we bring with us this same assumption that healing requires effort, discipline, concentration, and persistence. Yet here we encounter a startling reversal. Effort is the very thing that prevents spiritual healing. This is not said lightly, nor carelessly, nor to encourage indifference. It is said because effort proceeds from the belief that something is lacking. And the moment you assume lack of health, lack of harmony, lack of God, you have already stepped outside the truth. For God does not come to fill a void. God is the fullness that was never absent. Effort says, I must do something to bring God closer. But the truth is, the Lord is nigh unto all them that call upon him. Psalm 145:18. Nearer than breath, closer than thought, more intimate than your own sense of self. What, then, could effort accomplish except to obscure that which is already present? The human mind loves effort because effort gives it a role. It allows the personal sense of I to remain active, involved, important. But the Christ says, I can of mine own self do nothing, John 5:30. This is not humility, it is accuracy. And until that statement becomes natural to us, not as words, but as consciousness, healing remains distant. Effort keeps attention fixed on the problem. Even spiritual effort often revolves around the condition we wish to escape. We pray about disease, meditate for supply, affirm against fear, and in doing so, we continue to grant these appearances a central place in consciousness. But what you keep before your thought, you keep alive. Spiritual realization comes only when the mind releases its grip, when it stops pushing, correcting, adjusting, and allows itself to rest in being. Not by might nor by power, but by my spirit, saith the Lord of hosts. Zechariah 4-6. Not by human determination, not by spiritual willpower, by spirit alone. You will notice that the deepest moments of healing in Scripture never occur during effort. They occur when effort ceases. When Peter walked on the water, he did not succeed by trying harder. He failed the moment he began to struggle. When the woman touched the hem of the Master's garment, she did not strive to be healed. She simply recognized the presence of life. And Jesus said, "Somebody hath touched me," Luke 8:46, not with the hand, but with consciousness. Effort assumes time. It assumes process. It assumes distance between where you are and where you must go. But truth knows no time. It knows no journey. It knows no becoming. Before Abraham was, I am. John 8:58. Healing is not something that happens later. It is something that is revealed now when effort ceases. This does not mean that you abandon spiritual practice. It means that practice is no longer an act of striving, but an act of listening. Meditation is not concentration, it is receptivity. Prayer is not speaking, it is communion. Study is not accumulation, it is illumination. And when these are freed from effort, they become natural, gentle, and fruitful. The moment you feel strain in spiritual work, you may be certain of one thing: you have slipped back into the belief of separation. You are once again trying to reach God instead of resting in God. And so the instruction is always the same return, not to words, not to statements, not to methods, but to the quiet awareness of presence. Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Matthew 11:28. Notice that the promise is rest, not healing, not success, not prosperity. Rest. And in that rest, all else is found. For rest is the sign that the soul has ceased from its own works and entered into God's. When effort falls away, fear falls away with it. And when fear is gone, the body has no reason to cry out. The mind has no reason to defend. Circumstances have no reason to argue. They simply adjust to the truth that is now recognized. So let us not strive to heal. Let us not strain to understand. Let us not labor to demonstrate. Let us be still. Let us rest in the assurance that he performeth all things for me. Psalm 57:2. Not will perform, performeth now. And in that resting, we shall discover that healing was never withheld. It was only delayed by effort. Now we come to a point where the teaching must pass out of words and into living, for it is one thing to glimpse truth in a moment of stillness, and quite another to let that truth become the atmosphere of our daily experience. Yet this is precisely what spiritual living requires, not occasional insight, but abiding awareness. The one principle is not something we turn to when trouble arises. It is not an emergency resource. It is not a remedy to be applied when conditions demand attention. The one principle is the very ground of our being, and it must be lived before problems arise, while they seem present and after they have faded from view. Most students falter here. They are willing to recognize God in meditation, but they forget him in traffic, in business, in family affairs, in bodily sensations. They live part of the day in truth and the rest in reaction. And yet the Master said, "Abide in me and I in you," John 15:4. Abiding is not intermittent. It is continuous. To live from the one principle daily means that we no longer check appearances for permission to be at peace. We do not wait to see whether conditions improve before resting in God. We do not consult the body, the bank account, or the opinions of others to determine what is real. We begin each day and meet each moment from the quiet inner acknowledgement, God is the only presence here. This does not mean that appearances immediately vanish. It means that they no longer govern us. They no longer dictate our thought, our mood, our decisions. We see them as reports, not realities. We hear them without fear, because we know that nothing is being said about God, and therefore nothing is being said about truth. Thou wilt keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee, Isaiah 26:3. Notice that peace is not promised to the one who occasionally remembers God, nor to the one who prays well, nor to the one who believes correctly. Peace is the natural result of a mind stayed, resting, abiding on God. Living this way requires a gentle discipline, but not effort. It is the discipline of returning. Whenever we notice that thought has drifted into judgment, fear, planning, or concern, we do not condemn ourselves. We simply return. We turn inward, not to fix thought, but to rest again in presence. This turning may happen dozens of times a day. Each time, it weakens the habit of separation. Soon we discover that reactions are shorter-lived. Fear does not linger. Concern loses its grip. Even bodily sensations pass without claiming authority, not because we suppress them, but because we no longer ask them to define reality. We live increasingly from the inside out. To live from the one principle daily also means that we stop living for results. We no longer measure our spiritual life by improvements in conditions. That is a subtle but dangerous form of materialism. We live for God realization alone, and we trust without watching, without testing, that all necessary adjustments will appear in their own way and time. Take therefore no thought for the morrow, Matthew 6:34. This does not mean neglect or irresponsibility. It means we do not project fear into the future. We do not imagine outcomes. We do not rehearse disasters. We live now in the awareness that the same presence that is here now will be there then, because there is no then. Gradually, a new way of being emerges. We speak less, but our words carry more peace. We do less, but what is done without strain. We find ourselves less eager to advise, correct, or rescue others because we trust the same presence at work in them. We learn to stand still inwardly, even while outward activity continues. This is spiritual maturity, not withdrawal from life, but freedom within it. Not passivity, but surrender of false power. Not indifference, but love purified of fear. Living from the one principle daily does not make life dramatic. It makes life simple. And simplicity is the mark of truth. My yoke is easy, and my burden is light. Matthew 11:30. When spiritual living feels heavy, something has been added that does not belong. So we learn to live not as seekers, not as strugglers, not as healers, but as witnesses. Witnesses to the fact that God is, and that beside him there is no power, no presence, no cause. And in this witnessing, life unfolds naturally, gently, and harmoniously. Let us rest now in this recognition, not to remember it later, but to let it become the very atmosphere of our living. Now we come to that point in our consideration which, more than any other, separates spiritual realization from all systems of healing, metaphysics, psychology, or religion. It is the point at which the human mind recoils, not because it is attacked, but because it is rendered unnecessary. And this point may be stated very simply. There is nothing to heal. Not that sickness is ignored, not that suffering is denied, not that discord is treated lightly, but that in the light of spiritual understanding, there is nothing there to be healed, because God did not create it, does not know it, and therefore does not sustain it. This is the final shock to the student, for up to this point, even the most devoted seeker has still been holding on quietly, perhaps unconsciously, to the idea that spiritual truth is something used to correct a wrong condition. And now that last support is taken away, the crutch is removed, the mind is left without occupation, and in that emptiness, truth alone remains. God does not heal disease because disease has no divine cause. God does not remove lack because lack was never present in God's universe. God does not forgive sin because sin has no reality in spirit. These statements do not come from hardness of heart. They come from clarity of vision. I have not spoken from myself, but the Father which sent me, he gave me a commandment what I should say. John 12:49. And the Father does not say what is untrue. If God were to heal something, God would first have to acknowledge its existence. If God were to correct error, God would first have to admit error as real. But God is not a reaction to appearances. God is being. And what does not proceed from being has no being. This is why the Master never said, I will heal you tomorrow, or I am in the process of healing you. He said, stretch forth thine hand, rise, take up thy bed, go thy way, always in the present tense, always from the standpoint of what is, not what must become. Now are we the sons of God. 1 John 3:2. Not later, not after improvement, now. When this is understood, the entire approach to life changes. We no longer look at ourselves or others as broken beings in need of repair. We no longer see the body as a problem to be fixed, or the mind as a battleground to be controlled. We see all appearances as claims, nothing more. Claims without law, without cause, without permanence. And here is the crucial point. We do not try to get rid of these claims. The desire to get rid of them still grants them reality. We simply do not accept them as truth. We do not wrestle with them. We do not fear them. We do not grant them identity. We let them pass as clouds pass before the sun. Who told thee that thou wast naked? Genesis 3:11. That is the eternal question. Who told thee that thou wast sick? Who told thee that thou wast lacking? Who told thee that thou wast separated from God? It was never God. And if it was not God, then it has no authority. This realization does not make one careless of human need. It makes one free of human fear. And freedom from fear is the beginning of compassion that heals not by doing, but by being. When fear is absent, the body responds. When fear is absent, the mind relaxes. When fear is absent, life reorganizes itself around harmony. The world believes that healing is about restoring what was lost, but in truth, nothing has ever been lost. The prodigal did not become a son again. He remembered that he always was one. This my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. Luke 15:24. Lost where? In belief. Found where? In recognition. So we do not work to heal. We work, if the word may be used at all, to see that God is all, to see that life is spiritual, to see that being is intact, whole, complete now. And when this seeing is clear enough, healing is no longer a goal. It is a byproduct. This is why I say that the final enemy, death itself, is not to be feared. It has no power, no presence, no reality. O death, where is thy sting? O grave, where is thy victory? 1 Corinthians 15:55. The sting is belief. The victory is illusion. And both dissolve in the light of truth. When you reach this point, not intellectually, but inwardly, you will notice something very simple and very profound. You stop watching yourself. You stop checking conditions. You stop measuring progress. You rest. And in that resting, life flows as it was always meant to flow, without strain, without fear, without conflict. There is nothing to heal because there is nothing wrong in God. And since God is all, there can be nothing wrong anywhere. This is not something to believe. It is something to realize. And realization comes not through effort, but through surrender. Let us rest now in this truth, not to use it, not to repeat it, but to let it stand, complete and sufficient, as the final answer to every question the world can ask. Now we come to the place where words must fall away, not because they have failed, but because they have served their purpose. Truth does not need repetition. It does not need reinforcement. It does not need protection. Once recognized, it stands by its own light. We have not been dealing with a method this hour. We have not been outlining a system of healing, nor establishing a practice to be remembered and applied. We have been brought step by step, quietly and gently, to a single realization. God is, and beside God, there is nothing. Not something to be overcome, not something to be improved, not something to be healed, nothing. If this realization has touched you even slightly, you will notice that the mind is quieter now than when we began. Not because it is tired, but because it has less to do. The strain of becoming has eased. The burden of responsibility has lifted. You are not waiting for something to happen. You are not expecting a result. You are simply here. This is the seal of spiritual work. Jesus did not end his teaching with instruction. He ended it with peace. Peace I leave with you. My peace I give unto you, not as the world giveth. John 14:27. Not the peace that comes from improved conditions, but the peace that comes from knowing that there is only one life, one power, one presence, and that this presence is fully expressed where you are. Do not attempt to carry these words away with you. Do not try to remember them. Do not quote them to yourself later. If they are true, they will remain without effort. If they are not true, no effort will make them so. Truth abides by itself. In the days to come, appearances may still present themselves. Sensations may arise. Situations may call for attention. Let them come. They will no longer be enemies. They will be opportunities not to fix, but to remember, not to struggle, but to rest, not to call upon God, but to recognize that God has never departed. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. Psalm 23:1. This is not a promise for the future. It is a statement of fact now. And when this fact is accepted, wanting ceases, not because everything has changed, but because you no longer live from the belief of lack. We do not ask now for healing. We do not ask for protection. We do not ask for guidance. We simply acknowledge, Thou art here. And in that acknowledgement, all asking ends. Your Father knoweth what things ye have need of before ye ask him. Matthew 6-8. Knowing that, what remains to be said? So let us be still, not as an exercise, not as a discipline, but as a natural response to truth recognized. Let the mind rest. Let the heart be quiet. Let the sense of self soften. There is nothing to hold, nothing to resist, nothing to become. I will never leave thee, nor forsake thee. Hebrews 13-5. That is not spoken to a future you, nor to a perfected you, nor to a healed you. It is spoken to what you are now. And what you are is not in danger. What you are is not incomplete. What you are is not separated. And so we end where we began, not with words, but with silence, not with effort, but with rest, not with teaching, but with being. Let the truth seal itself.